Welcome back, students. This question is about the pterygopalatine ganglion. Okay, located in pterygopalatine fossa. The question is, describe the pterygopalatine ganglion under following heads. Roots of ganglion. Okay, there are three roots, and we will learn about how the fibers they come from the three roots in the ganglion. Then what are the branches and the applied anatomy of the ganglion itself. Okay, so in answer, to begin with the introduction, you may write like this, that pterygopalatine ganglion hangs from the maxillary nerve in the pterygopalatine fossa. Okay, it is a parasympathetic ganglion which receives the preganglionic fibers from the facial nerve. That means this is in relation to that of the, though it is hanging by the maxillary nerve, which is from the second division of the trigeminal nerve, fifth cranial, but there the ganglion is in connection with that of the facial or the seventh cranial nerve, and it is, as I said, a parasympathetic ganglion. Now let us come to see the roots of ganglion. And this ganglion, as I said, has three roots: parasympathetic root, sympathetic root, and that of the sensory root. Okay, so three roots, out of which two are concerned with the autonomic nervous system, sympathetic and parasympathetic, and the third root is somatic nervous system. Okay, so this is the sensory root, which carries the sensation of the various kind, pain, touch and temperature. Okay, exteroceptive and proprioceptive sensation. Now let us go to the parasympathetic root first. Okay, we will see the parasympathetic root. Now here I have drawn a diagram of this pterygopalatine ganglion. See this? This is a large ganglion I have drawn, pterygopalatine ganglion, and its root, the three roots are shown by the three different colors. Here is the yellow color, and by its two roots, this ganglion is hanging to the maxillary nerve. This is the maxillary nerve in the pterygopalatine fossa. Now, what you will see here, that the second root is that shown in the red color. Okay, and this is the parasympathetic. Wherever the parasympathetic is there, whether it is the preganglionic fibers, the preganglionic fibers are shown in the dotted line, while that of the postganglionic fibers are shown in a continuous red line. Similarly, this is the third root, sympathetic root, taking origin from T1 level of the spinal cord from lateral horn, where preganglionic sympathetic neurons are situated, and this dotted line in the violet color indicate that it is the preganglionic sympathetic fibers. This is the superior cervical sympathetic ganglion, and this is the sympathetic chain in cervical region, and this postganglionic sympathetic fibers which are arising from the neurons in this superior cervical sympathetic ganglion. They are shown in continuous line going towards the ganglion. Okay, but you should note that both the sympathetic as well as that is somatic, that means fibers from maxillary nerve, they don't relay in the ganglion. They just pass and cross. Okay, and then they are distributed along with the various branches of this ganglion. Okay, along with the various branches of the pterygopalatine ganglion. Only relaying fibers are that of parasympathetic, because in this ganglion the postganglionic parasympathetic neurons are situated, which will give the postganglionic fiber, which will go to the various glands. Okay, to the various glands. So this is the planning of with the color codes of the three different parts of the this ganglion. The roots of the ganglion. Okay, roots which are coming. So what we were talking that there are three roots: parasympathetic, sympathetic and sensory root. Now let us come first to the parasympathetic route. Now the preganglionic parasympathetic fibers, they come to ganglion. Okay, preganglionic and I said that the red dotted line is the preganglionic parasympathetic fibers which arise from a nucleus which is either called superior salivatory nucleus or the lacrimatory nucleus, because the one of the glands supplied by this preganglionic, say the parasympathetic fibers, is the lacrimal gland. Okay, it is the lacrimal gland. So it is called as lacrimatory nucleus also. The preganglionic fibers, they run in the seventh cranial nerve, that is the facial nerve. This is the genu of the facial nerve in petrous temporal bone, from where these preganglionic fibers, they will leave the ganglion, genu of this seventh cervical nerve, and will just come in the middle cranial fossa as the greater petrosal nerve. The greater petrosal nerve. And this will lie in front of the petrous temporal bone anterior surface. Then it will go towards foramina lacerum, and just on the surface of foramina lacerum, this will be joined by the postganglionic sympathetic fiber, which are shown in the continuous line as the violet color. And these two fibers, then they will join to form what is called as nerve of pterygoid canal, because they are running into the pterygoid canal. And this pterygoid canal, on its posterior wall of the pterygopalatine fossa, this posterior wall, there is a foramina through which this nerve of pterygoid canal will come and will join this ganglion, that is pterygopalatine, enter into the pterygopalatine ganglion, right? So this here then the parasympathetic fibers, preganglionic, they will relay into the neurons which are located in this parasympathetic ganglion, that is the pterygopalatine ganglion. And then the fibers from this parasympathetic postganglionic fibers, which are shown in the continuous red lines, will go to the three different nerve. Okay, different gland. See these fibers, postganglionic red fibers going to this gland which is called as the lacrimal gland, and stimulation of which lead to the lacrimation or the tear formation from the lacrimal gland. Secretomotor fibers will lead to the secretion. Second, postganglionic parasympathetic fibers, they will go to the nasal mucous membrane, where lot of the mucous and serous glands are located in the nasal mucosa. Okay, and the third postganglionic fibers, they will go to the palatine gland, which are situated in the hard palate mucous membrane or mucosa, and to the soft palate mucosa. And this glands of the palate will be supplied by the greater palatine or lesser palatine, and this red line indicate the postganglionic parasympathetic fibers. So this is how the root of the parasympathetic fiber is there. Okay, let us go to the sympathetic fiber. Now, as I said that sympathetic fibers, okay, which is the root for the pterygopalatine ganglion, comes from the preganglionic neuron located at the thoracic first spinal segment in the lateral horn. And this sympathetic fibers as a preganglionic fibers comes as a dotted line in violet color, which will relay in the superior cervical sympathetic ganglion, okay, in the neck, and then they will form, give rise to the postganglionic fibers shown in continuous line. First they will lie as a plexus on the internal carotid artery, okay, internal carotid artery, and then this plexus will form a nerve which is called as the deep petrosal nerve. So I will write down here, this is the deep petrosal nerve, which is the postganglionic sympathetic fiber, deep petrosal nerve. And this deep petrosal nerve, which is postganglionic sympathetic fiber, will lie together with that of the greater petrosal nerve, which is the parasympathetic preganglionic fiber, and these are the sympathetic postganglionic fiber. They will run as a nerve of the pterygoid canal, and here the parasympathetic, as I said, will relay, but the sympathetic fibers, they will cross the ganglion without relay, and this dotted, these solid violet lines, they are going to the pharyngeal nerve now, they are going to the orbital nerve, they are going to that of the nasal branch, they are going to the greater and lesser palatine nerve, to the hard and the soft palate. Okay, so this is how sympathetic fibers will distribute without relay, and these sympathetic fibers, they are the vasoconstrictor. Their main function is to constrict the blood vessel, tunica media, smooth muscle of the blood vessels. Okay, so this was the second route. First route was that of parasympathetic, second route is that of the sympathetic. Let us come to the third route, and this third route is the sensory route, okay, which is coming from maxillary nerve, through which this ganglion is hanging in the pterygopalatine fossa. Now, the sensory route of ganglion is derived from maxillary nerve, and these fibers do not relay like that of the sympathetic. They do not relay in ganglion, but they just pass through without relaying. And you can see that this is the maxillary nerve which gives this sensory route, and these yellow fibers, they are just passing to the various branches of the ganglion without relaying here. I said that the relay station, it is only for parasympathetic nerve fibers. Okay, parasympathetic. So these are the three different routes: parasympathetic, sympathetic, and the sensory route. Okay, let us come to the branches of this ganglion. And if you see the branches of this ganglion, okay, they carry the sympathetic, parasympathetic, and sensory fibers, and these are the following branches. I will just name the following branch. Orbital branches. Let us see the orbital branch. See here, from the ganglion, this branch is going in the orbit, okay, and this is the orbital branch, and it innervates a muscle which is called as orbitalis muscle, okay, and then it supply to the mucous membrane of the sphenoidal and posterior ethmoidal air sinus. So this nerve, that is the sensory nerve here of the ganglion, which is orbital, it supply the sensory supply to that, and the sympathetic supply to that of the paranasal air sinus, mucous membrane of the paranasal air sinus. So both kind of, without the fibers, which are the parasympathetic fibers, are not going, because it is not supplying to the gland, it is supplying to the blood vessels and to the mucous membrane, so of this paranasal air sinus. So let us come to the second branch, and the second branch is the greater and lesser palatine branch. See here, downward, this is the palatine nerve which will divide into lesser palatine and to the greater palatine nerve, okay, and this will go directly downward from the hanging ganglion into the palatine canal, and here it will come out as through the greater palatine and lesser palatine foramina on the palate, okay, at the base of the skull, and will supply to the fibers will go to the lateral nasal wall, okay, lateral nasal wall of the, and to the hard palate, to the soft palate, to the palatine tonsil, okay. So this area is supplied, and most of these fibers, they are carrying all three types of fibers. That means sensory fibers in yellow, the violet fibers in sympathetic fibers in the violet color, and that of the red color is that of the parasympathetic, because the glands of the palate and the nasal mucosa, that will be innervated by parasympathetic, while sensory by these yellow fibers from maxillary nerve, and then the vasomotor fibers from sympathetic come and will supply to the blood vessels and will supply. So this is the greater and lesser palatine branches after these orbital branches. Let us come to the nasal branches. This is the nasal branch, and nasal branch comes in the nose through this Pterygopalatine foramina, which is just medial to this ganglion. So this will go in medially into the, through this foramina will come into the nasal cavity, okay, and this will be grouped as the posterior superior nasal and posterior superior medial nasal branches in the nasal cavity on the medial wall and the lateral wall, okay. And this will also contain the various kind of fibers, the sensory fibers, the motor fibers, that is parasympathetic, postganglionic, and that of the sympathetic fibers, because it will contain the nasal mucous membrane contain lots of the glands. So the parasympathetic fibers will supply. Plus the blood vessels are supplied by the sympathetic and sensation is supplied by the maxillary nerve in the nose. So this is the nasal branch. Let us come to the pharyngeal branch. See this, after the ganglion, a branch will arise and it will go backward, and this will run into the palatino-vaginal canal, from where the branches will go to the pharynx. Okay, it is will go to the pharynx and then to that of the tympanic tube. Okay, tympanic tube. So this will supply to the mucous membrane of pharynx and to that of the tympanic tube, mostly the sensory as well as that of the sympathetic fibers. Okay, after this, once again I will review the distribution of the various fibers. The parasympathetic fibers mainly will supply to the three glands, lacrimal, palatine and nasal glands. Okay, because they are secretomotor fibers, parasympathetic. Sympathetic fibers are vasomotor, that means they are supplying to the blood vessels, tunica media, smooth muscle, and they will go and supply the mucous membrane of nose, pharynx and mostly air sinuses. Now the sensory fibers, which are branches from the maxillary nerve, they will supply to the orbit, to the nose, to the palate and to the pharynx, okay, and to the pharynx. So this is how the distribution and the roots of this pterygopalatine ganglions are there, okay. Now coming to the branches of ganglion, I mean say coming to the applied anatomy after these branches. The applied anatomy is in relation to the irritation of the pterygopalatine ganglion, and this is secondary to the allergic condition. That means when allergy because of the hay fever will be there, or by still because even if by the common cold, the irritation of pterygopalatine ganglion is common, and this will lead to the running of the nose. Why it will lead to running of nose and eyes? Okay, because the parasympathetic fibers are supplying to the glands of the nasal mucosa, to the eye, and then this is also supplying to that of the vasomotor fibers to the nose. So the blood vessels will dilate, okay, and then there will be the, I mean to say, swelling, I mean the excessive secretion from the glands of nose as we get in common cold, okay. The glandular secretion will be there, then there will be sneezing will be there because there is irritation of this nerves are there in the nasal mucosa. And if the condition of this hay fever and irritation due to allergic irritation of pterygopalatine ganglion is severe, then the condition can be treated by injecting the alcohol in the ganglion. Which ganglion? Pterygopalatine. And the symptoms, okay, the disease will be relieved. This completes the description of pterygopalatine ganglion, its roots, its branches and its applied importance. Thank you very much for watching this short video.